Welcome. Thanks for taking the time to join us this afternoon. I think we've got a great session. You'll note that nearly 60% of all the symposium participants came from staff. So I think that this is a session that's going to be of interest to many of you. And before we begin, I have some very quick thank yous. Certainly want to thank Dean Hopi Hoekstra, and Dean Scott Jordan, and Professor LaTanya Sweeney for championing the efforts in generative AI, specifically around administrative innovation. I also want to thank, I know he's not here, but Chris Stubbs. When I was appointed as co-lead of this particular work stream, first thing I said was, sounds great. Second thing was, what is that? And then the first thing I did to get myself up to speed was to have an extended conversation with Chris, who was very gracious in informing me what I needed to know and some potential possibilities in terms of administrative uses. And so for that, I'm grateful. I also want to thank the team who organized and supported today's symposium, folks like Valerie Balinson, Catherine Gates, Jess Bowen, Liz Rader, and Tiffany Ashtoncourt. And then I also want to thank the Hewitt team for making so many of the tools available, like the AI Sandbox. So this session is the Administration Innovation Show and Tell. It's really designed to be an intentional space to share what some of our administrative colleagues have been doing in generative AI. And I'm hoping that for those of you who haven't yet taken the plunge and don't know how to get started, that this will be informative and inspirational for you to do so. So I'm pleased to have my colleagues present to you, and let me do quick introductions. So we have Bridget Cooney, our first speaker. She is the principal project manager in the CADM Project Management Office, which is led by Karen McInnes. Bridget's been a higher education project manager for 11 years and nearly 3 years at Harvard. She works on strategic enterprise-wise priorities that span a wide variety of topics, things like the Harvard Construction Academy, the Reimagining the Campus Community Safety Initiative, and the FAS HUDS project, which I've been working on with her. And so that's how I got to know her. Second, we're going to be hearing from Kathy Santoro. She is the Senior Director for FAS Human Resource Programs and Operations. Kathy is a industry veteran, been working in HR for 35 years, the last 10 of which have been at Harvard. And in her role, she focuses on strategic HR initiatives that develop strong leadership and management practices that promote diversity, engagement, and collaboration. So she also oversees the FAS talent acquisition and provides HR consulting support to a portfolio of client organizations. And then our third speaker is Naveen Reddy. Naveen is the inaugural Strategic Director of Endowments of Gifts within the FAS. Naveen has been leading cross-functional business teams in finance, operations, and IT for over 2 decades in the public sector. And he joined us 18 months ago and is tasked with helping our units maximize their use of endowment funds to support the teaching and research mission of the FAS. So these panelists have all taken the plunge to experiment and explore generative AI to enhance their work streams. And the 3 things that I asked of them in thinking about their presentations, you're going to hear sort of three themes. One is describing the pain point that they were faced with that they hoped generative AI could address. The second is having them talk about their approach and sort of a little bit about the tools, how they went about using generative AI to tackle that particular pain point. And then the third thing is to reflect on the impact and thinking about what they've learned and what the possibilities are moving forward. So just some quick rules of the road here. Each of them is going to speak for about 10 to 12 minutes. They'll go consecutively, and then we'll hold off on the Q&A until the very end. So just save your questions until then. So without further ado, we'll welcome our first panelist, Bridget Cooney.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to be speaking with you all today. My target audience is really those of you who have yet to really maybe explore this tool at all. I hope you will find this presentation practical and useful, and maybe some tips you can put into practice right away. Now, I have to be honest, when it was first suggested by Catherine Gates that I implement this tool as part of the FAS HUDs project, my gut reaction was, that sounds really intimidating and kind of daunting, and I'm usually not an early adopter of any kind of technology. But I kind of wanted to save face, Catherine, so I rolled up my sleeves and I started exploring, and it has proven to me to be quite useful. So with that, let's dive in. Okay, so the pain point. You don't need to be a project manager to understand, we all know administrative duties, while they are critical to Harvard operations, they can be very, very time consuming, right? So the question was asked, how can we leverage generative AI to alleviate some of this administrative burden? And specifically, I'll touch on today how we're using this tool to develop high-level meeting summaries, lists of actionable next steps, and even tailored follow-up communications. So the case study we'll be looking at is a current project that Ismael noted. It's a collaboration between FAS and HUDs. And as you can see from this vivid image, I wanted to convey to you, it's a complex governance structure. We have stakeholders from across campus involved, 27 to be exact. We have 3 work streams running in parallel. Ismael is co-chair of the data collection and analysis work stream. And so as you can see here, we have many moving parts. It requires tremendous coordination, and clearly it's a lot of administrative lifting. Now, how are we using Gen AI? I will not go into the step-by-step nitty-gritty during this short presentation, though I'm more than happy to connect with you offline. But at a high level, we're following 3 overarching steps here. 1, with consent, we are recording the meeting in Zoom, and I will be touching on the topic of consent more momentarily because that's an important topic. After we record the meeting, we are simply downloading the Zoom transcript and then re-uploading it into the Harvard AI sandbox. And then the final step, this is the fun part, we are using natural language. We're basically just entering our prompts, and you can draft your own. I wanted to add to this slide my favorite prompt. It's missing, so I'll tell it to you right now. I like to pretend with this tool that it's like a sentient being. We know it's not yet, but I say my favorite prompt right now is, hello, you are a project manager. Please provide me with a high-level meeting summary, a list of meeting attendees, and a list of follow-up actions. And that's my favorite prompt right now that has saved me tremendous time. So let's talk about this in a bit more detail. The question is this an administrative game changer? Now, continuing with the FAS HUDs project example, I estimated one-hour meeting. I would be busy during the meeting, making sure I'm capturing all the salient points, and then I would spend maybe about 30 minutes after the meeting polishing the notes, extracting the actionable next steps, and then drafting a tailored follow-up communication. So conservatively, I estimated that's a 90-minute effort in this analog world, right? But we know this is a brave new Gen AI world. I can now do all of these functions in 15 minutes, which is mind-blowing to me. So for the FAS HUDs project alone, I'm spending about 5 hours in meetings per week for this project. This time savings only grows exponentially when I consider my entire project portfolio. So what am I able to do? I think it's important to note, I wanted to note a few things about this. One, I'm able to now participate in meetings in a very different way because I'm not bogged down with trying to capture every important point that's stated. And I am now, with my kind of new time in my back pocket, I am able to do the things that kind of frankly boost my job satisfaction, more innovative and creative efforts, the things I enjoy a lot more. So it's a value add, I think, for Harvard and for my own personal job satisfaction. I think the impact on turnaround time is notable as well. So in the old world, 2 to 3 days between the meeting taking place and then my ability to deliver the tailored communication to stakeholders, depending on, of course, what else is going on in your world. But now I can turn it around the same day. And we all know sometimes you have to miss a meeting, right? So I was reflecting that I think this has helped instill trust with my stakeholders because they know they will receive something from me in a timely fashion and I will be keeping them in the loop. So it's maintaining that important sense of momentum and stakeholder trust. Reflecting on the impact, I really wanted to emphasize today that this is a human-centered tool. It really doesn't render you passive, like you're not just pushing a button and calling it a day. Quite the opposite. You really need to pay attention during the meetings, and this tool will not pick up on nuances like someone, say, furrowing their brow or putting their arms across their chest, telling a joke. That you need to pay attention so you can contextualize the information. Now, I have found the transcription tends to be much more accurate in a 100% Zoom meeting versus a hybrid setting. I have found it's a little spotty sometimes, with maybe dependent upon the audio quality of the room is my hypothesis there. And if someone arrives late to a meeting, it doesn't always register they have joined. So I still manually check that. But in essence, is it a perfect tool? No, but the time savings alone, it gives you a pretty incredible launch pad to work from. So I have really inadvertently become a super fan of this, which is why I'm here today. A few considerations, back to the topic of consent. I never hit that record button without obtaining the consent of the people in the room. And I use this now across all of my projects, and on numerous occasions we agree for many different reasons. Sometimes we agree not to record. So you really need to have that conversation, explain why you want to record and how it will be used. Consider the sensitivity of the topic and really how you can create an environment where your stakeholders will be able to freely share their thoughts and you can effectively move the work forward. So it's clearly very situation specific. Of course, be mindful of the policy in place. L3 and below data is what's permitted, so you're not going to throw like social security numbers in there or credit cards or what have you. So ultimately, I did want to leave you with a final point. I want to emphasize that I'm not using this tool to produce direct quotes from people. So I'm not following up saying Jane Doe today said, quote, da 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 da. That's not how this is being used. I'm using it to create a high-level essence of what was discussed and then a list of follow-up actionable next steps. And that's where I have found it to be the most valuable and impactful use of this tool. So ultimately, I look forward to all of your questions, and I will now turn the room over to Kathy. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. we go. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathy Santoro. Don't you guys laugh at me. I'm Kathy Santoro from FAS HR. I'm here to talk to you about using ChatGPT to find and interpret HR information. That was my challenge. So the pain point, in order to provide managers and staff with HR advice, HR consultants navigate through emails, they look on SharePoint, they're looking on websites and the internet for documents that are going to provide them with correct information that they can share with their clients. The documents themselves are often long and dense and time-consuming to search and find the language that's needed to respond. I was partnering with Elise Sacchetti in FAS HR, one of the directors of HR consulting. And we wanted to create a tool for the HR consultants that would help them find language in the policies and in labor law that would answer their clients' questions more consistently and faster. There are varying levels of experience and expertise among the HR consultants. So sometimes, depending on who you spoke to, you might get a different answer to a question. And consistent HR practices obviously are really important for a lot of reasons. And that was one of our goals. Not only do they need to know what policies and laws apply, but they often have to interpret those policies and how they apply to a particular employment situation. They also have to sometimes interpret multiple policies or laws and understand how they're going to apply and how they intersect. As an example, Family Medical Leave Act, Mass Paid Family Medical Leave Act, and the Americans with Disability Act all intersect to address job protection while somebody's on a leave. So it's nuanced, it's complicated, and as a result, the HR consultants often consult with their colleagues on what the problem is, what the options might be for resolving the situation. And even, am I looking in the right direction to find the answer? So our objective here with the HR consultant coach is that it would be speedier, we'd get more consistent advice, and it would be actually a conversational resource when we're working remotely and there's not somebody in the next office that you can sit down and go talk to, or it's at night and you can't get them on Teams. It's something that you can help think through different situations. So the solution, build the HR consultant coach GPT. So we actually created a model in the enterprise version of ChatGPT. And we started by identifying what the universe of information was that consultants used in their day-to-day life, actual policy documents, content from the HHR website and FAS HR website. I mean, I literally went to the website and cut and pasted into big Word documents, stuff that was on the website. I used PDFs where they existed. Creating the model itself was easy. The hardest part was creating the instructions to the model so that it was giving me the kinds of answers that I wanted. And to be honest, in the end, I asked the model to create the instructions for me, and then I cut and pasted them into the instructions. So that seemed to work fine. Once I knew I could only upload 20 documents, I needed to combine a lot of different documents into single documents. So as an example, HHR has a whole series of what happens when documents, and what happens when you leave Harvard, what happens when you retire. And so I put them all into one, combined them into one document. And then I labeled them so that if I need to go in and update them, I can find the information, because some of these documents are like 60 pages long. After I uploaded all the documents, I started with the basic prompts, tweaked the instructions, continued testing, and just going back and forth trying to see, is it giving me accurate information? Is it giving me complete information? I actually could check a box so that it does go to the internet, and I can say to it, go to the internet and tell me well, I'll show you later. I don't want to give away all my secrets. I also took notes along the way because it was pretty clear to me that the HR consultants themselves, who will be the users of this model, would need some training. So I'm going to share a couple of examples of how it went. The first prompt looks good, doesn't it, Ismael? Does a manager need to fill out a prep to hire a replacement if there's no change to the position? For those of you who aren't familiar with what a prep is, it's a form that is used in FAS to get approval to move ahead with some kind of an HR action. And sometimes you need a prep and sometimes you don't, and there's a grid and not everybody knows where the grid is. And so it can get very complicated. But in this case, the answer was correct. There is no prep needed to post a straight replacement. Another example, in this case, I wanted to tell it to search the internet for Massachusetts minimum wage. And I also asked it to provide me a link. And I was just testing it. I wasn't sure if it would actually be able to provide the link, but it's been pretty good about identifying source information. Even in all my uploaded documents, sometimes it will say, this is the policy, and I saw paragraph 4, and it will tell me, because that's in its instructions to let me know. So, upon reflection, so far we've been pretty happy with the results. We've learned things like, you get the best answer if you tell it where to search. It has 3 sources of information: its own knowledge, the internet, and all of the uploaded documents. And so if I want something, say, from the HUCTW manual, I can say, go to the HUCTW manual in your uploaded documents and give me the shift differential. It does have a tendency to pontificate, and that can be good and bad. Sometimes you want a short, simple answer, and I found if I say, give me a short, simple answer, it will, after giving me a long answer, it will give me the short, simple answer. But sometimes the long answers are actually helpful because they'll remind me of things that, maybe I've gotten into a habit of handling certain situations a certain way, and I don't always think about other options that I really should be considering. The users need to know what information was uploaded so that they understand what it has and doesn't have. When it has to go out to the internet, the information isn't quite as specific as when it goes to its uploaded documents. It's not perfect. The HR consultants need to have the experience and expertise that they have in order to really use the model. It doesn't take somebody who doesn't know about it and make them an HR consultant because they just won't know whether what they're getting is actually even correct. Hold on one sec. I can't even find my mouse on here. So it is successful at shortening time, the amount of time it takes to find information. It was successful at providing that conversational resource. We're in the process right now of beta testing, and thank you, Jen Callahan and Ben Norton, who have agreed to use this every day and give us feedback. One of the things I discovered is you can actually ask it to put the prompts and its responses into a spreadsheet, so it makes it easier to be able to track how the beta testing is going. And the other thing we also experimented with a little bit is a subject matter expert. There's a form for requesting an independent contractor that has to be scrutinized by someone who understands the law and Harvard's policy. And right now it's a two-step process where there's a person who looks at the form, says, yep, everything's complete, this can go through, and then someone who says, yes, I approve the form. So we put the information into a model and ran some forms through it, and it did a pretty good job of evaluating whether or not somebody met the criteria for being an independent contractor. So anyway, I just want to thank my colleagues who have been helping me with this, and I would thank you all for coming today. So. Let me close out of this.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Naveen Reddy. I am the Strategic Director for Endowments and Gifts for FAS. I've been in my role for a little over a year and a half. I feel really bad actually going after Bridget and Kathy because they created these applications to help others, and I did this for myself. So one, just a quick story. It was actually exactly a year back during commencement. My niece was graduating from our master's program. That's when just ChatGPT was getting more popular, and I was told to write a speech for her graduation party. And then I was like, oh, this is a lot of work. I gave a few prompts in ChatGPT. This was real basic. This was like exactly a year ago, and said write a funny speech. And I told a little bit, like 5 or 6 things about my niece. And it spit out such an amazing speech I would never have written in my life. So that was my first exposure to ChatGPT. So my role here at Harvard and FAS is to unlock the potential of our FAS endowed funds and maximize our usage of them and bring in more flexibility. I'm an army of one. So I was like, 1, I'm very lazy. 2, I was like, just based on my background, I hate to do the same thing multiple times. So I'm like, all of my work involved doing the same thing multiple times. So I was like, okay, how can ChatGPT help me? So that's where I started. So what does my work involve? Some of you may know we have over 8,000 unique endowments and gifts at FAS. Each of them have unique terms. So they tell you what you can use it for and what you cannot. Very specific on what it can be spent for. We in finance have done tremendous work on trying to categorize each fund into different buckets. Have done a lot of work on trying to generate reports. But what I have found is that it's not always easy to categorize a bunch of terms into one bucket. It could do more than one thing. But we have categorized it into one bucket based on the majority of what it could do. And every time I wanted analysis of a fund, I was running multiple reports from different systems. One, I was looking for 3 things every time I was looking at a fund. 1, what is the fund? Fund number, what are the terms of the fund? Like, what is it going to do? Give me all the financial information as of right now. What is the income? What's the balance? What have they spent? And then always I used to go back and say, how did they do last year? What was their utilization like last year? Because I want to get a complete picture. So I had to go back, run another report as of last year, go back, do a bunch of calculations in Excel and say, okay, what's the utilization based on the income last year? If you include the balance, what's the utilization look like? And I used to do that for every fund I was trying to analyze. And if there were buckets of stuff, categorizations of information, I want to look at professorships or financial aid or different information, spending a lot of time trying to do repeated tasks. So that's where I was like, okay, can ChatGPT help me do my work better? So created a custom model, took the 2 Excel spreadsheets I normally always go to, one information as of today, what's the fund, what are the terms, what is what's the financial information, which division, and all of that stuff. And then my second Excel spreadsheet, where did we end up last year, utilization and all of that. Put both of those spreadsheets in there. You can see those spreadsheets there, right? So, and then started asking it questions. It was pretty amazing. It was pretty amazing on what it was giving me. So simple things like, what's the fund balance of a particular fund? Boom, few seconds. So when somebody emails me regarding a fund, I don't go to my Excel sheets anymore. I open my ChatGPT, and sometimes I don't even know the fund number. I just put in whatever, and it comes back, right? And then I ask, what are the terms of the fund? It spits it out. And then I ask it more complicated things. Tell me what the balance is right now, but also tell me where we ended up last year, what the utilization was. That's a very complicated thing to do if I was doing it manually. I would have to open two spreadsheets, get this information, first find the fund in this one, get that information, go to this other spreadsheet. There's no way of doing this automatically. And I've done that. I've done the manual work many, many times. And then it went even further more, like asking it to give me information on a particular cause. Like I've used it to give me Korea-related professorships. Goes and reads all of the terms and it spits out funds which are related to professorships studying Korea. So amazing. I've done that with public service. It was the Phillips Brooke Institute. We had a meeting with them a couple of weeks ago trying to find funds which support public service. My other alternative would be to go to Excel and try to go to the terms column and try to do public and service and do manual stuff. Now it's read through 8,000 different terms and I spit out information. So, and then you can ask it, hey, put it in a nice downloadable Excel spreadsheet, and it does that for you. It creates the Excel spreadsheet for you. So it eliminates programming. I don't have to go to Ismael for like, hey, can you join these two tables and give me this data? Eliminates me going to VLOOKUP all the time in Excel and all of that stuff. So, okay, so I think I might have talked about this. So what are the benefits? The response time has been really fast. It gives me access to multiple data sets in one view, which I don't know how it's like technically possible unless you go build your own separate database and do all of that work. And it extends search capabilities beyond our current classification. Like right now, we have classified these funds into different categories, but we know funds are more nuanced than that. A professorship fund could also support financial aid, but right now it's categorized as professorship. So now how do we find that, right? So unless you read the terms, you're never going to know. So this gives you that natural language processing. Okay, so lessons learned well. Actually, creating the model was not that hard. Once I uploaded those Excel spreadsheets, I actually had ChatGPT do all the work. I said, is my data correct? And the first thing it came back was it read all the fields and it said, no. I said, why? Then it said, how your income is negative, your expense is positive. And then I go back and say, hey, our accounting systems are all like this. If financial folks in the room, if you go run any financial report, the income when you download it is negative. That's how our accounting systems work. So then I went and said, you know what, let me go to my data and just create another column and converted all the negatives into positives, right? So converted negative balance into a positive balance, uploaded the files back. Then I said, can you read the files now? And then it read through all the files and it said, oh, perfect, it looks good. Huge amounts of data and gave me a bunch of other things. So, okay, so I think I talked about the need for data cleaning. The other thing I want to stress is the information is as good as what you put into it. This is a custom GPT model, right? This is working on the information I give it. So if I give it junk, I'm going to get junk back. So that's something to be really cautious about when you're trying to work with data or huge amounts of language fields. So Some responses were too generic. At the beginning, I had a lot of this is not all. I mean, there's huge benefits I see now, but there's a lot of work I had to do to get to asking it the right prompts. And I'll show you an example. And this is also, I think the volume of data is huge, right? So 8,000, you have huge task text for each fund having its own terms. So it's a little bit more complicated that way. So I'll show you an example. So this is the original terms of our Regan fund, which I spent too much time on. If you just focus on the text in crimson, it's donated by, it's a gift by Regan, who was a secretary of the Treasury under President Reagan, right? And it supports distinguished speakers, right, in economics, government, social problems, right, to come and give some lectures. But when I asked ChatGPT, give me the terms for this fund, look what it gave me. The income for this fund is to be used to support the Donald D. Reagan Lecture on the US Presidency in the Division of Social Science. 90% of what it said is correct, but the terms are completely wrong. Right? It was a generous gift by Reagan. He was the US Secretary of the Treasury. He was the Chief of Staff to President Ronald Reagan. But what the fund is supposed to be used for, completely wrong. People have been talking about hallucination and all of that, right? Then I had to get back to prompts of give me exact terms as written. I don't want you to summarize anything for me, right? So those are things learned as you go. So what's ahead? I think continuing to train the model. I'm working on creating a custom, the same thing what I did here just for professorships. So I can share with our Dean of Faculty Affairs so they can ask questions and see what comes out, right? So, and see where it goes. And maybe we get to a point where I don't have to have Excel spreadsheets and it's directly coming from the database. So I don't have to download even that information. Makes me even more lazier, right? So it's getting to a place where I think is more real time. And I have to say this is all pilot and this has just been me right now testing it out. So there's lots more work ahead to get us to where we want to be. Okay. Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to invite the panel to come up and we'll open up a discussion. I think we've got folks with the mics, Catherine and Tiffany. So I'll start with the first question and then we'll open it up. So I think for the benefit of those who haven't quite made the leap yet, right, and aren't sure how to get started, can you talk a little bit about how you all got started, sort of overcome sort of that hesitancy and inertia? So.
Sure, I'll start. As I said, I found this concept a bit daunting personally. So I guess my advice is kind of ignore some of the jargon, frankly. I initially did some cursory Googling, like what are the top ChatGPT prompts for project managers, and a whole treasure trove opened up of ideas, and then it helped get my wheels spinning. And then I just started playing from there. And some things were useful and some things weren't. So I would just encourage you to play with it and see what will add value for your work purposes.
So I first was introduced to ChatGPT when my 30-year-old son showed me his cover letter that he had created for a job application. And when I knew you were going to be asking us this question, I asked my son, you were kind of the impetus for getting me interested in this. And, you had that cover letter. And he said, yeah, it'll give you a cover letter that is well written, but it doesn't get you the job. Because it was too generic. It was like, he had uploaded the job description, and it was kind of like what we saw earlier. And so for me, the idea, there's endless possibilities for how I could see using this, but I have just been excited from day one to get into it.
Yeah, I would say start small. And the other thing I always look into is if you're doing a task repeatedly multiple times, think about what can help you try to do it once. And I think ChatGPT could be a part of that solution. So any repeated work should definitely be looked at, how you can automate it either through ChatGPT or some other way.
Excellent. Questions?
I have a question. So it seems like the majority of your applications use GPT Enterprise rather than like the AI Sandbox. Is that correct?
You didn't, did you?
I use the sandbox.
And you too use.
Yeah, so let me talk a little bit about that. I was using the regular sandbox for a long time until I created the chat custom GPT model. And every time I used the sandbox, I had to upload the files every single time I had to ask a question.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to do more analysis, but for me, it felt like the sandbox was working better than my custom model.
Okay.
And some of it is because it's not trained enough. So I am now working on, sometimes I still go back to my sandbox and upload the files because if I'm tired of it not giving me what I want, I just go back to that. So I'm not sure technically what the difference is between the both, but I do feel like it has worked very differently for me.
I was curious if GPT Enterprise was something that's available as a resource to, I'm a Harvard PhD student, and I could see the benefits of this as like maintaining knowledge in the lab as you have turnover through the years. But I was curious if that's something that we have resources to actually start implementing or not.
Yeah, depending on the application, we're sort of, just because of the current structure and where we are in terms of those licenses, we're sort of doing small pilots on a case-by-case basis. So if there's a potentially interesting use case, there are potential folks that you can talk to sort of pitch that idea.
Hi, thanks. Great presentations, you guys. I have a follow-up question. So I shouldn't know the answer to this, but when you're building, so Kathy and Naveen, you built these custom models. So what tool are you using to build those? Where does that live? Kathy, how are you pushing that out to consultants so that they can use it? I'm just a little lost on how you take that next step. Thanks.
It is.
Basic question.
It's the enterprise. It's the enterprise version of ChatGPT. I had to get a special license for it. And then my beta testers each have a license for it. So you have to have to even use the model, you have to have a license. And it costs money. I don't know how much it costs, but. So each consultant must actually have a license to take advantage of the model. Yeah.
I think you can share in the custom model I built. I think you need a license for building the model, but once you build it, you can share the link with others who have access to GPT. So Ross, I'll show you my link so you can be my tester. They need a free, the sandbox, they need a full version?
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the people who we want to use and interact have to have that paid version.
But it is, we had a meeting at one point where somebody from Hewitt said, well, there's a no-code version, and I'm like, sign me up for that, the no-code version. And it, anybody, I think, can create these models.
Hi, thanks so much again for all of these interesting use cases, which have been very helpful. I'm curious, Naveen, you touched on it a little bit, but could you each talk through how you got through that moment, which I'm sure you reached at some point of, this isn't working. What did you try next? Did you go to Google? Like, how do you overcome what feel like roadblocks as you're trying to build these tools? Like, what helped you navigate those things? Thank you.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think all.
So I'll share one of the applications that you get, there's like 3 boxes you can check. Do you want it to browse the internet? Do you want to use the image generator? So it starts by saying you want to generate an image. And I said, I want a gender neutral logo for the HR consultant coach that represents professional HR advice. And it gave me a man in a suit. And I must have said no less than 50 times, please remove the tie. It gave me women with ties. It gave me half men, half women with ties. It was like, it was so frustrating. It was like it wasn't listening to me. So then I went to Google and uploaded my own image. And I did go to Google at times, and I went for help on prompts. I went to Google for help on the instructions. I really spent a lot of time struggling with the instructions for it.
I would say take an existing use case and make sure it's giving you what you want. Because I didn't trust it until I took all the manual work I was doing and made sure it was giving me back the same results, and in some cases it was not. So I think it takes a little bit of time to build confidence, but if you have existing work you're doing right now, replicate it in ChatGPT and see what it does. I think that's the only way you can really know, unless it's a trial and error method. But in most, I think the benefits outweigh some of the challenges you were having, but I always cross-check my work because I still don't trust it 100%. I do cross-check it, but for quick day-to-day things, it's like now I have a business analyst and a data analyst all working for me, right? So it just feels like there are other benefits.
Yep, there and then there.
Thank you all. Great presentations. I'm curious for, we all know here at Harvard, we have a lot of acronyms. So when I've used it for some meeting recordings, there is sometimes, it's like you said, it's hit or miss. Sometimes it's crystal clear and golden. Sometimes I'm like, I'm worried about missing points that maybe I was tuning into certain things, but thought it would capture more often around things like acronyms when we're talking about projects or departments and things. Have you played around at all with any customizations in advance of a meeting? I don't even know if that's available on the sandbox or substituted anything or had any experience like giving it any direction before kind of getting the transcript to help reduce that time? Because I think one of the themes that comes out with this, right, is clearly with some projects, there's an upfront time suck that doesn't feel efficient, but it's worth it at the end. But for some other things, if you're kind of doing it each time, it leaves, and I've heard from other folks, that's their hesitation with trying this. And I know in some cases it's been like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And in other cases, I'm like, it would have been quicker to do it myself. So I think that's always a tension. And like, how do we think about that with the experiences you've all had?
There have been times when I've had to go back to the transcript because it has missed what I recalled was a really important point that should be included. I have yet to do any kind of programming on the front end, though. So that's worth exploring. It hands down, in my experience, it's been a time savings. But I hear you, because when you do need to go back into the transcript and Control F, find the point you recall, right? And then copy paste it back in. It's a little clunky. But the net impact in my experience is still a savings. But I will look into that. That sounds like a good idea. Thank you.
There are the instructions section in when you're building the GPT is pretty robust. I think Kathy had mentioned like how she asked ChatGPT to write the instructions, but you can specify. One of the things I added, just thinking ahead, was like if there are people have more questions on a particular fund, where we have a form now people can fill. In the instructions I put, if there's more questions, here's a form to fill to reach out to our FRC. And when it answers the question, it puts that in every time it answers a question, saying if you have more questions, reach out to and here's the form to reach out to them. And I just put the link in the instructions and it shows that up. So there are, I think, many ways to put as many instructions as you want when you're building it. But what really works is again, you have trial and error method. You have to just figure it out.
Yep. We'll go to Catherine, then, and then.
Yeah, I'd like to hear just a little bit more about this question of trust and your confidence. The idea of maybe not taking written minutes or not writing down the deliverables really scares me. And so I wonder if you all just started to get on this a little bit with your most recent comments, but a little bit more about how confident you are in the systems and that trade-off of things that you double check, the time you're spending to double check things.
I know, so on some of the efforts where we agree not to record, maybe it's a sensitive topic, then I am doing notes the old-fashioned way, right? Typing it up during the meeting. So you're still capturing things. I think there are just certain times when stakeholders don't want to be recorded, right? For any number of reasons. And I think we always need to respect that boundary, right? To help support a trusted environment. I don't know if that. Oh, in the model.
Oh. Yeah, I will, if it doesn't seem right, and this is why I made the point that I think it's important that that the tool is used by someone who has expertise in the subject matter. I'll ask it to, tell me the source, give me the link, give me the actual language from this law or a policy. And when you're asking for something that specific, it's usually right. It's when it decides it wants to explain it all to you that it might kind of miss the point sometimes.
I sometimes do a bit of an iterative process. Like initially I'll ask for the high-level meeting summary, and then I sometimes want more detail, right, to cross-validate. I have all the actions. I'll follow up and say, thank you, please provide a more detailed meeting summary. Or you could say, please provide more detailed follow-up actions. And it'll usually spit out quite a lot more detail. It just depends how granular for your purposes you want to be. But in my experience, it's done a pretty great job capturing the relevant next steps.
I think there's like elements of work where you need full trust and some things you're willing to take a little bit of risk. So if it's just a question I'm asking, like, give me the terms, right? Or if it's more detailed work you're going to send to your boss, you better verify everything is correct, right? So, but it's, I think the basic amount of, at this point, if you're trying to start using it, don't trust it, is what I would say. Verify it so that you build your trust. And I think getting to a place where you will find that it's very helpful to you, even for you to get the basic information for you to even like validate it. Just getting there is a lot of work. So I feel like I may be even sometimes redoing the work is lesser work than me doing it all over. Do you know what I mean? Like it feels, it's doing at least, it's getting me to a place where I would have spent much more time.
I think the one thing I'd add to it, since I've had opportunity to play around with the tools, is keeping in mind that the analog, I like to think of it, it's almost like when you're flying, if you're a pilot flying the plane, putting the mode in sort of autopilot, right? But ultimately you're still in control, and you have to be mindful and sort of to the points that have been made, right? You have the expertise to be able to really evaluate, okay, is this right? Is it not right? And it's probably just a matter of sort of getting those repetitions under your belt where you can see, okay, here are the limitations, and here's where I have more confidence. And it takes a little bit of time. Plus, these tools are continuously evolving as well, and they're going to get better. think we have one more question over here. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm interested in using this for capturing meeting notes. So going back to like recording Zoom, for example, and there is a function in Zoom that is like Zoom AI that you can use. So I'm wondering, are folks using the Zoom AI function to do that summary and then uploading that? Or do you just like, you just want to get like as raw transcript data as you can before uploading it into the sandbox?
I've been using the raw transcription file. So I have, like in my Zoom settings, I've enabled the transcription goes to the cloud. And then afterward, I can just log into my Zoom account and view all of them. But I haven't explored the one that's embedded into Zoom itself. That would be interesting to kind of cross-check which one's more accurate. But
yeah, I don't know that that's been activated yet. There's been
I can speak a little bit to that.
Perfect.
Hi, Annie Rhoda. I'm in Harvard University IT, and I can tell you a little bit that the Zoom AI companion is the thing that you're referring to that does a lot of that function. It has not yet been enabled in the Harvard Zoom environment, not because we can't, but because we're going through all the kind of crossing our T's and dotting our I's to make sure that we're enabling that in an appropriate way. And you know, there's a lot of policy questions involved in there. So that is coming. And I think it will, I'm hopeful that that will do a lot of the work that you're doing with one less step. So maybe it'll take you 12 minutes instead of 15.
Great. I think that's a wrap. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.